You never forget your first best friend. For me, it wasn't a kid from school or some cousin I saw every summer. It was a dog. A scruffy, oversized, golden-furred mutt with ears too big for his head and a bark that echoed down every alley in our quiet town. His name was Max. I was 8 when Max came into my life. My dad had just left us, quietly, without warning, leaving behind a garage full of broken tools and a note that said something vague about not being enough. My mom cried every night for a week. And I just felt hollow. The day Max arrived was rainy. Not the gentle kind of rain that soaks the earth. This was a storm. The sky split open like it was grieving too. I was sitting on the porch steps, staring at the puddles, when I heard it, a whimper, soft and desperate. I turned and there he was. Soaking wet. Shivering. Matted fur, ribs poking through like broken piano keys. His eyes met mine, those wide, amber eyes that looked too human, and I swear something passed between us in that second. Like we both knew. Like we both had been left behind. I ran inside, grabbed an old towel, and begged my mom to let me keep him. She said no. We couldn't afford another mouth to feed. We could barely afford the heat that winter. But Max didn't leave. He curled up beneath our porch, refusing to go. And I kept sneaking him scraps, half my dinner, bits of toast, whatever I could get away with. On the third night, when the cold turned bitter and the wind howled like it wanted to steal something from us, I found Max curled into himself, barely breathing. I didn't ask my mom this time. I carried him inside. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me, then at him. Then she grabbed an old blanket and wrapped him in it. From that day on, Max was family. If there's a heaven for dogs, it probably looks a lot like the backyard we had back then. A wide, uneven patch of grass, half dirt by the tree stump, full of dreams only we could see. Every afternoon after school, I'd throw sticks, and he'd bring back logs. He always over-delivered. We were inseparable. When kids teased me for my hand-me-down sneakers or the hole in my backpack, Max would wait at the school gate like my own little bodyguard. He'd bark at the bullies, tail wagging like he knew he couldn't bite but wanted them to think he might. At night, when Mom worked late shifts, I'd sneak Max into my bed. His fur always smelled like earth and safety. I'd whisper secrets into his ear, fears about growing up, questions about Dad, dreams about becoming someone that mattered. And he'd listen. Always listen. He was there when I got my first failing grade. When I found out Mom had to skip dinner so I could eat. When I broke down because life felt unfair and I didn't know how to fix any of it. Max didn't have answers. But he never looked away. He made the silence less cruel. Dogs don't stay young forever. By the time I hit 13, Max started slowing down. He didn't run as fast. Sometimes he'd limp for days after chasing a squirrel. His golden fur turned gray at the edges, and he slept more than he played. I didn't say it out loud, but I saw it. And I hated it. One day, I found him sitting at the back fence, staring at the sky. Not barking. Not whining. Just still. Like he knew something I didn't. I sat next to him and whispered, "You're not allowed to leave me too, okay?" He rested his head on my leg. That was his promise. But promises, they don't always hold. As I got older, life sped up. I got a part-time job at the gas station. Took harder classes. Fell in and out of awkward crushes. I had less time for backyard games and long walks. Max waited. Always waited. He'd be at the door when I got home, tail thumping against the floor like a slow drumbeat. Sometimes I'd pat his head and say, "Tomorrow, buddy." Tomorrow became next week. The next month. And still he waited. When I got accepted into a state college 2 hours away, it felt like the first real win of my life. My mom cried. I cried. Even Max licked my face that night like he understood something big was happening. I promised I'd come home every weekend. That he wouldn't even notice I was gone. But college was busy. Classes. Exams. New friends. Parties. My visits turned from weekly, to monthly, to holidays. Each time I came home, Max was older. Slower. Thinner. Still he wagged his tail. Still he waited. One night during winter break, I caught him sleeping by the front door. My mom said, "He does that a lot now. I think he's waiting for you." It crushed me. I sat next to him that night, just like I did years ago. I told him about school, about my classes, about how proud I was of us. I told him I missed him every day. He rested his head on my lap. That was his answer. If I had known what was coming, if I had understood just how long a dog can wait, maybe I wouldn't have left so soon. Maybe I would have stayed for one more walk. One more throw of the stick. But life doesn't send you warnings. Sometimes, it just leaves you holding memories. The day I left wasn't supposed to be a forever kind of goodbye. I remember waking up that morning to the sound of Mom's hurried footsteps and the smell of burnt toast. She was never good at breakfast when her mind was somewhere else. Boxes lined the hallway, taped up with names scrawled in black marker. Kitchen, linen closet, misc. It was one of those mornings where you just know your life is about to change, but you don't yet understand how much. Max was already at the door, his leash between his teeth like he always did when he wanted to go for a walk. His tail thumped against the wall, full of hope. He didn't know. He didn't understand suitcases or lease agreements or custody battles whispered in the dark after bedtime. He was just happy. Happy I was there. Happy it was morning. Happy we were together. Not today, buddy, I said, kneeling to rub behind his ears. He leaned into my hand, his fur warm and familiar, like home. Dad came out of the bedroom, his face unreadable. He looked past me, past Max, to the driveway where Mom was waiting in the car. There wasn't any yelling. No fighting. Just silence. That kind of sad silence that feels heavier than shouting. I gave Max one more hug. I'll be back soon. Just a few weeks, okay? You stay with Dad. I'll come visit every weekend. But we both know now that weekend never came. 1 week turned into 2. 2 into a month. Then came the excuses. It's too far. Your dad's schedule is complicated. Max will be okay, he has a backyard and plenty of space. But no one asked Max what he needed. Called sometimes. Asked about him. Dad would say, he's doing fine. He waits at the gate every afternoon. You know how dogs are. But I didn't know. I didn't know that every time a car passed, Max would jump up, tail wagging, eyes wide with hope, only to sink back down when it wasn't me. I didn't know that he'd sleep near the gate some nights, as if that would bring me closer. And the worst part? I didn't even fight hard enough to go see him. I was 13. I thought grown-ups made the rules and we just followed. I didn't understand yet that some goodbyes only hurt later, once the permanence sinks in. Weeks passed. Then seasons. I'd look out the window and wonder if Max was lying under the same stars. If he still remembered the sound of my voice. If he still waited. I told myself I'd write him a letter. That someday, when I was older, I'd show up with my arms wide open, and we'd pick up right where we left off. But dogs don't live on promises. They live on presence. And I wasn't there. Not when he stopped eating regularly. Not when he grew slower, waiting day after day with ears perked at the gate. Not when the winter cold crept in and he'd curl up tighter just to feel safe again. He waited anyway. Because dogs are like that. Because Max was like that. And by the time I finally made it back, by the time life gave me permission, I was standing at a gate that no longer opened the same way. And Max, well, Max had already given everything he had. Years went by. You'd think with time, things would get easier, or at the very least, quieter. But time doesn't move like a straight line. It loops, folds in on itself, catches you off guard when you least expect it. One moment, you're walking into high school for the first time, nervously adjusting your backpack, trying to seem older than you feel. And the next? You're staring at a familiar patch of sky, wondering if someone, or some dog, is still out there looking up at that same moon. I tried to forget. Not because I didn't love Max, but because it hurt too much to remember. At first, I asked about him every week. I'd bug my mom constantly, "Can I go see him this weekend? Did Dad say anything?" She'd brush it off, offer me a half-hearted, "maybe soon," before turning back to whatever she was doing. Eventually, I stopped asking. Not because I didn't care, but because the answer was always the same, and it never came with any action. I didn't have a phone of my own, and Dad wasn't exactly the best at returning emails. The only updates I got came through birthday cards or stiff conversations over holiday dinners when my parents would awkwardly trade me back and forth like luggage. Still, I held on to the idea that Max was okay. That he still slept in that sunny patch by the living room window, still barked at the mailman like clockwork, still had his food bowl by the back door, the one with the little chip on the rim from when he got too excited and knocked it over. I filled in the blanks. That's what the mind does, right? When you love something, you create the reality you want to be true. But then came high school. New friends. First crushes. Homework that kept me up until midnight. Soccer tryouts. The chaos of growing up. There was so much noise, and Max was a whisper that kept getting softer. Yet every now and then, the silence would sneak up on me. I'd walk home in the fall, crunching leaves under my boots, and suddenly remember how Max used to chase after them like they were prey. Or I'd come home from a long day and instinctively want to curl up next to someone, only to realize that someone was a dog I hadn't seen in years. I didn't have pictures of him on my phone. No framed photo in my room. Just memory. Just the way he smelled like warm grass and peanut butter. The way his ears perked at the word walk, even if you whispered it. The way he always knew when I was sad, even if I didn't say a word. And then came that one weekend in junior year. I was cleaning out the garage with Mom, going through boxes we hadn't touched in forever. That's when I found it. A box labeled Max in Dad's handwriting. Inside, his old leash, frayed, still a little muddy at the clasp. His collar, red with tiny bones printed on it, the silver tag still attached. A faded tennis ball. And a photo of us, me maybe 9 years old, arms around his neck, both of us grinning like idiots in the backyard. My throat tightened. My chest felt hollow and full all at once. I hadn't seen that photo in years. And just like that, the weight of it hit me. I hadn't been there. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't fight harder to keep him in my life. I let the world get loud, and I let Max fade into a corner of my heart I was too afraid to open. I wanted to ask Mom why we never visited. Why she didn't drive me to see him even once. But I already knew the answer. Because it was easier this way. Easier for her. Easier to move on. But not for Max. And not for me. Later that night, I called Dad for the first time in months. His voice cracked when I asked about Max. There was a long pause before he said, I didn't know when, or how, to tell you. He passed a year ago. In his sleep. Peacefully. I sat there in silence, holding the phone, my fingers numb. A year ago. That meant I had missed everything. The last belly rub. The last treat. The last lazy afternoon nap where he probably waited for a footstep that never came. Did he still wait by the gate? I asked, my voice barely audible. Dad hesitated, then said, every single day. And that broke me. Because loyalty like that, it's rare. And I hadn't earned it. I hadn't deserved it. But he gave it anyway. Even when I never came. Even when my shadows stopped falling across his door. He waited. Years passed, and Max never stopped loving me. The same couldn't be said for some of the people in my life. High school ended. I got into college. Left town. Started over. New people. New routines. But no matter how far I went, there was always that part of me still standing at the gate. Still hoping I'd turn the corner and see a furry blur running toward me, tail wagging like a metronome set to joy. Still hoping for a reunion that time had already stolen. Max never made it into my graduation photos. He wasn't there for my first heartbreak. Or the night I sat alone in my dorm room, crying into a pillow because the world suddenly felt too big and I felt too small. But I know this. If he had been there, he would have crawled into bed with me, rested his head on my chest, and reminded me in his silent, loyal way that I was any 10 years since I walked away from that red wooden gate with a duffel bag on my back and a promise in my throat that I never spoke out loud. I told myself I'd come back soon. But life doesn't always leave space for soon. College turned into jobs. Jobs turned into exhaustion. The occasional holiday visits turned into phone calls, and eventually, even those faded into silence. But no matter how much time passed, there was always this pull. A thread that tugged at me in quiet moments. In the middle of city traffic. In the crackle of autumn leaves. In the smell of wet pavement after rain. Max for alone. It had been nearly 10 years. 10 years since I left. His memory wasn't a single image anymore. It was a feeling. A sound. The echo of paws on hardwood. The creak of the back door as he nudged it open with his snout. That morning, I found myself back in town. I hadn't planned it. The business trip ended early. I had a rental car and a few hours to kill before my flight. My GPS buzzed for the route to the airport, but my fingers moved on their own, tapping in my childhood address. The drive felt shorter than I remembered. But as I turned onto that familiar road, something inside me started to ache. Not the sharp pain of loss, but the quiet, breathless ache of guilt. The house hadn't changed much. Same mailbox, leaning slightly to the left. Same cracked sidewalk I used to rollerblade down until Max knocked me off balance with his overexcited tail. And then for the gate. Still red. Still wooden. Still standing. But older now. Weathered. The paint peeling like tired skin. The kind of gate that had opened thousands of times, and now waited in silence. I parked across the street and sat there, engine off, hands frozen on the steering wheel. My eyes searched the yard for movement. Nothing. No blur of fur. No ears perking up. No joyful bark. Just stillness. I stepped out slowly, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Each step toward that gate felt heavier than the last. Not because of fear, but because of everything I never said. Everything I never did. And then I saw it. Nailed to the post, right under the house number, was a small, hand-carved plaque. That's when the tears came. Not the polite kind. Not the single, aesthetic tear that runs down your cheek in movies. This was the kind that shakes your shoulders, breaks your breath, and forces you to kneel because your legs can't hold the weight anymore. I didn't hear my dad come out. Didn't notice the front door creak open. All I heard was the softest voice say, "He waited." I turned, wiping my face with my sleeve. Dad stood on the porch, older, grayer, smaller somehow. But his eyes were kind. "He'd sit right there," he said, pointing to the worn patch of grass by the gate. "Every day around 5. Like clockwork." I couldn't speak. "He never looked sad," Dad continued. "Just hopeful. Like he knew you'd come back one day." That broke something in me. Because Max had more patience than any person I'd ever known. And more love than I deserved. "I wanted to come," I choked out. "I did. Life got in the way." Dad nodded. "It always does." We stood there for a while. 2 grown men. 1 ghost of a dog. And a decade's worth of unsaid words sitting between us. Eventually, I stepped into the yard. Walked past the swing where Max used to sleep under my feet. Past the tree where we buried his favorite bone the day he turned 5. Dad followed, slow and quiet. Behind the garage, tucked beneath the old willow tree, was a small stone. A grave. Simple. A tennis ball sat on top. Worn, weathered by rain and sun. But still there. I knelt beside it. Placed my palm on the cool stone. And for the first time in a decade I spoke to him. "I'm sorry, buddy." Not much more. Just those 3 words. Because what else do you say to the one who never stopped loving you, even when you disappeared? What else do you say to the one who waited, day after day, just for the sound of your footsteps? I didn't deserve forgiveness. But somehow, kneeling there, I felt it anyway. A breeze rustled the willow leaves. A quiet moment passed. And then Dad said something that stayed with me. "He never gave up on you. Not even at the end. He kept listening. Kept watching. Like he believed you'd walk through that gate, even if it took forever." And in that moment I realized something. Max didn't just wait because he missed me. He waited because he believed in me. He believed I'd come back. That I wouldn't forget him. That our story wasn't over. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Because even though it took me 10 years, I came back. Not for closure, but for one last walk. I stood, brushed the dirt from my knees, and looked around the yard. I could almost see him. Tail wagging. Ears flopping. Tongue out, panting from excitement. And I swear, if you believe in these kinds of things, I felt him brush past me. Just for a second. Like he was saying, "Took you long enough." I smiled. A real one. And whispered, Let's go home, boy. They say when you lose someone, human or not, you never really move on. You move forward, but a part of you always stays behind. That's how it felt leaving the backyard that day. The sun was setting, casting a golden light through the willow branches that hung over Max's grave. I took one last look at the stone, the faded tennis ball, the place where his tail used to kick up leaves, and I whispered goodbye again. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't break. Because this time, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like a door opening. The echoes he left behind. Back in the house, everything looked smaller. Maybe I had outgrown the furniture. Maybe the walls had closed in over the years. Or maybe time just erodes things in a quiet way. Makes them less sharp, less heavy. But not Max's presence. That was still everywhere. His water bowl still sat by the kitchen corner, turned upside down but never thrown away. His leash hung on a rusted hook by the back door, its leather worn, its clips still shiny like it had just clicked into place yesterday. Dad noticed me looking. I couldn't get rid of them, he said softly. Felt wrong. Like he might need them again. I nodded. I get it. It wasn't about logic. It was about love. That night, I stayed in my old room. The posters were gone. The shelves bare. But the spot at the foot of the bed, where Max used to curl up every night, that space felt just as sacred as it always had. I slept with the window open. And at some point, in that strange half-dream space between sleep and memory, I heard it. The soft thump of a tail against floorboards. The gentle jingle of a collar. A weight settling near my legs. It could have been a dream. Or maybe it was something else. But it didn't matter. Because I felt him. And I felt peace. The next morning, Dad made coffee. Strong, bitter, just the way he liked it. We sat on the porch, neither of us saying much. But then he asked the question I'd been avoiding. Are you going back today? I looked at my phone. My flight was in 5 hours. The notification blinked on the screen like a reminder that I had somewhere else to be. So because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like running toward the next deadline, the next meeting, the next big thing. I felt like being still. Like listening to the silence my old life had left behind. Dad handed me a manila envelope. Old, weathered. My name written on the front in Max's signature scribble. The one I used when I pretended he could sign things with a paw print. What's this? I found it a while back. You wrote it when you were 12. Inside was a handwritten list, titled, Me and Max's Dream Adventures. It had things like, go camping in a forest. Dig a hole so deep we hit China. Be in a dog movie together. Learn how to skateboard with Max pulling me. Grow old together and never say goodbye. I stared at the last one for a long time. Ked up me other life to live. But suddenly, I wasn't sure I wanted to go. I don't know, I said. And that was the truth. And then I laughed. Because 12-year-old me really thought love could stop time. Later that day, I visited the animal shelter. I don't know why. Maybe to feel close to something. Maybe to say thank you in a way Max would have liked. A volunteer greeted me at the door. She was kind, gentle, and full of that quiet strength people who work with abandoned animals always seem to have. I told her about Max. About how he was the dog that waited. She smiled and then asked if I wanted to meet someone. We walked past rows of kennels. Some dogs barked, some wagged, some stared with hollow eyes. But in the corner cage, curled in the shadows, was a mutt with mismatched ears and a coat like autumn leaves, burnt orange and soft gray. She looked up. Didn't bark. Didn't flinch. Just stared. And something clicked. The volunteer opened the gate. She doesn't trust easy, she said. She's been here a while. I knelt down slowly. Held out my hand. And after a moment, she inched forward. Sniffed. Then pressed her head gently into my palm. Her tag read, Junie. Hi, Junie, I whispered. I'm sorry I'm late. I didn't adopt her that day. I visited 4 times over the next 2 weeks. Sat with her. Read to her. Let her sniff my shoes and curl beside me without pressure. It wasn't about replacing Max. That would never happen. It was about honoring him. Because the truth is, Max didn't wait so I could mourn forever. He waited because he believed I'd find my way back to love. And I did. When I finally brought Junie home, the house felt lighter. Dad smiled when he saw her. "She's got Max's eyes," he said. And maybe she did. Or maybe love just finds a way to reflect itself in new forms. Max waited for me every single day, without question, without anger, without giving up. He didn't need apologies. He didn't need explanations. All he wanted was for me to come home. And when I finally did, I realized something. Home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling. It was loyalty, patience, forgiveness. It was him. Now, every time Junie curls up beside me, every time she runs to the gate when I come home from work, every time I whisper, "Good night, girl," I say it with one more soul in mind. Because Max taught me that love doesn't die. It waits. It watches. And when you're finally ready, it finds you again. What would you do if the one who waited for you never got to hear the door open again? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart even just a little, please give it a like. Subscribe to Secret Shed Stories for more real, raw, unforgettable tales of loyalty, grief, and healing. Because somewhere out there, there's always a shed full of memories, waiting to be opened again. Studio microphone, this is Secret Shed Stories, signing off.